All right, so today we're going to start solving equations that are multiplication. So we have two worksheets. You're going to do every other problem. So like we're going to do this problem today. We're going to skip, do this problem, skip, do this problem, skip it, do this problem. So we're going to keep going, doing every other. Get down to this sheet, same thing, going across. We're going to do this problem, skip it, do this problem, skip it, do this problem, skip it. So here, it's like doing the odds. Up here, because they're by letters, you just got to do this one, skip it, do this one, skip it, do this one, skip it. So we have three different type of multiplication problems that we're going to talk about. And if I were you, we're going to go over each type. And I want you to kind of have something to look at because they're all solved just a little bit differently. So first of all, we know that letters next to numbers mean to multiply. So this is going to be one of our type of problems we're going to solve. And we have just a regular integer next to a number. All right. Then we have two more. When I have a problem like this, we're going to talk about when I have a variable on top of a number, how we're going to solve this. So this is another type, just like this. And then we have a third type where we have like a fraction in front of the letter. So as you are doing this, I would have something set up so you can look at these three different types as you're doing it and say, okay, here's this type, here's what I need to do. So let's get started. So let's start with this one first. I'm going to do two examples of each. So, and what you can rewind this as much as you want and watch these type of things. All right. So the first one is when I have just a regular number right next to a letter. So this means multiplication. The way that I kind of remember this is the way that we undo multiplication is division. All right. So here's what I'm going to do. We know that like if I had, sorry, brain dead for a second. So if I had this fraction 10 over 2, we know that fractions mean division. So because of that, here's what I'm going to do. This is multiplication. I'm going to do this, undo this multiplication by division. So I'm going to make this into a fraction. So this is like my division because fractions mean division. Now, we always divide by what's attached to the letter. So I'm going to divide this by 4. All right. So first thing is, this means multiplication. I undo it by division. So I'm going to make fraction bars because fraction means division. And then I always divide by the number attached to the letter. And here's the reason why. Because 4 divided by 4 is going to give me 1. That will get the x all by itself. Now remember, whatever I do to one side, I have to do the exact same thing the other side. So if I divide this side by 4, I also have to divide this side by 4. My equal sign, if you remember from yesterday, breaks everything up into like a left side and a right side. So now we just do the work on the left side. 4 divided by 4 is 1. So I now have 1x. Notice what I just did. I just got the x all by itself because 1x is the exact same thing as, oh, I got to figure out where my new tool's at the bottom. Now I can't seem to find my eraser thing. No, that's not it. All right, I'm not sure how to erase, so you're going to have to work with me. So this becomes a 1, so that's 1x. So I just got the x all by itself. Now we do the work on the right. 28 divided by 4 is 7. So I know that x is 7. Now, I know a lot of you are out there like, yeah, I know x has to be 7 because 4 times 7 is 28. This is the work I have to see. Just like yesterday, even if you know the answer, you still have to do the work to show me how you got it. All right, let's do another one. So once again, numbers next to letters mean to multiply. I undo multiplication by division. So I'm going to divide both sides by something. Whatever I do to one side, I do the same thing the other. Now, we always divide by the number that's attached to the letter. Notice this number attached to this letter is a negative 3. So I want to make sure that I divide by the number, the negative 3, not just a 3. We divide by the number attached to it. Now, if I divide this side by negative 3, I have to do the exact same thing to the other side. That was one of our legal moves that we talked about last week. All right, so let's clean this up now. My equal sign kind of splits everything in half. I have a left side and I have a right side. Now remember, 3 divided by 3 is 1. A positive divided by a positive, or negative divided by a negative, is a positive 1. And that's why we had to divide by a negative 3. That way we get a positive. So this just becomes a positive 1y. All right, so I just got y all by itself because 1y is the exact same thing as just y. Over here now, 24 divided by 3 is 8. Because the signs are different, it's a negative 8. And if we were to plug this back into our problem and put a negative 8 in for y, well, negative 3 times negative 8 is a positive 24. So this is the work that I have to see. Like I said, I don't care if you know what this is. This is the work that we need to show is how we got there. So this is our first type of problem, is when we have an integer attached to a letter. When they look just like this, this is how we're going to always solve all these. All right. The next type that we would like to do is, go to my screen, is this, when I have a fraction attached to a letter. Okay? This is still a type of multiplication problem. So here's the way that I always like to solve these type of problems. So anytime I have a fraction attached to a letter, we're going to do this. I'm going to multiply by its reciprocal. So a reciprocal is when I take a fraction, I flip it upside down. So the reciprocal of 1/2 is 2 over 1. I just flip it right upside down. And the reason is, look at this wonderful cross canceling that's going to happen. All of our stuff's going to go away. Now remember, if I multiply this side by a 2 over 1, then I also have to multiply this side by a 2 over 1. My equal sign splits into 2 parts. So over here on the left, I can do one of 2 things. I can think of this as 2 times 1 is 2. On the bottom, 1 times 2 is 2. And that just becomes a 1. So this becomes 1y. So notice I multiply the top, multiply the bottom. That gives me my 2 over 2y. 2 over 2 is the same thing as 1. So that's just my 1y. That's how I get my 1, or my y, all by itself. Oh, there's my eraser. And so that is getting the y by itself. So I multiplied by its reciprocal. I flip this fraction upside down. So I multiply this side by 2 over 1. I do the same thing over here. So now when I do this math, all right, I'm just going to come over here so a little more room. If this is, you can just think of this as 25 times 2, which is just 50. Or if you want to think of it as fractions, 25 is 25 over 1 times 2 over 1, which gives us 25 times 2 is 50 over 1, which is just 50. So this becomes 50. So y equals 50. So anytime I have a fraction times a variable, we multiply by the reciprocal because I get this cross multiplying. That's how I get rid of this number. Now if I go to this problem, same type of thing. Notice how I have a fraction times a variable, fraction times a letter. I get rid of it by multiplying by its reciprocal. So I'm going to flip this upside down. So I'm going to times that by a 4 over 1 because look at this awesome cross canceling that happens. If I multiply this side by 4 over 1, then I have to multiply this side also by 4 over 1. That's a 4, not a 9. There we go. My equal sign splits into 2 pieces. So on my left side, we can cross cancel. And this just becomes 1 over 1, which is 1. So this, all of this just becomes 1q. So I just got q all by itself. Over here now, I have negative 20 times 4. Well, 4 over 1 is just 4. So 20 times 4 is 80. Signs are different, so it's a negative 80. So if I were to put a negative 80 in for q, 1/4 times negative 80 would be a negative 20. Or think of it this way, 1/4 times 80, break 80 into 4 equal pieces. Each piece would be worth 20. All right, same thing here. Half of 50, yep, that would be the 25. So this is the type of work that I need if I have a fraction times a letter. We multiply both sides by its reciprocal, and then we simplify the left simplify the right. All right, so we've got two different types so far. When I have a fraction next to a letter, and then the previous one is where I have it set up like this. And if you remember correctly, I just multiply by, wait a second. I got the wrong one here, don't I? And then we had this one right here where I have a number times a letter, sorry. And then we undo it with division. We divide by the number attached to it. All right, our third and final type is like this, where I have a letter on top and a number on the bottom. Now, I don't want you to memorize how to do these three parts. I want you to kind of be able to think your way through what can we do to get this letter all by itself. So here's where I'm going to be a little sneaky. Since there's a 6 on the bottom, I'm going to do this. I'm going to times it by 6. And the reason I'm doing that is we can make that into a fraction. 6 over 1 is the same thing as 6. Look at this cross canceling that happens. That's going to get rid of my number in the bottom. If I multiply this side by 6, I have to do the same thing over here. All right, so once again, when I have a number over a letter, this idea that how can I get rid of the 6 on the bottom? Well, multiply by a 6 on top. So it'd be 6 over 1. So my equal sign splits this into two pieces. I'm just going to work on this left-hand side. So when I do that, I can cross cancel. 6 goes into 6 once. 6 goes into 6 once. Now, look what happens. This is now 1 times x, which is just x. On the bottom, we have 1 times 1, which is 1. It's just x over 1. And x over 1 is the exact same thing as just x. So that's how I got this letter all by itself. Now don't forget, we got to do the work on the right. 5 times 6 is 30. So I know in this problem, x has to be a 30. And if we go back to it and we put a 30 in for x, what is 30 divided by 6? Yep, that's 5. All right, so this is our third type. And remember, even if you can do this in your head, I still need to see the work. What did you do to get this letter all by itself? There's a 6 in the bottom, so I can multiply by a 6 on top, so I get my cross canceling. All right, so let's come over to this problem. Notice how I have a 7 in the bottom. So what can I do? Well, let's think about some cross canceling. I want to have a 7 in top, so I'm going to multiply by 7, so this cross cancels. Make it into a fraction. Notice the cross canceling that's going to happen here. If I multiply this side by 7, I also have to multiply this side by 7. My equal sign splits it up into two sides. I'm only going to work on the left-hand side right now. All right, on the left, look at my cross canceling. That's why this is so important here. 7 goes into 7 once. 7 goes into 7 once. On top, we have 1 times w, which is w. On bottom, you have 1 times 1, which is 1. And w over 1 is the exact same thing as just w. So we got the letter by itself. Now don't forget, we also got to do the right-hand side. Negative 3 times 7, well, 3 times 7 is 21. The signs are different, so it's a negative 21. And if I were to put negative 21 into this, this would be negative 21 divided by 7, which would be a negative 3. So we've got 3 different types of problems. And when you do them, you may have to go back and rewind this video and take a look. All right. But this is the idea. When I have a letter on top and a number on bottom, we multiply both sides by the number on the bottom because it will cross cancel out. If I have this type of a problem with a fraction times a letter, we multiply by its reciprocal on both sides because once again, the cross canceling. It's all about the cross canceling in these. And then I do the same thing over here. The third type is what we started with. When I have a number attached to the letter, and I like to just think of this as a multiplication problem, we undo multiplication by division, and I always divide by the number attached to the letter because that is going to reduce. It's going to cancel out. 4 divided by 4 is 1. So we have 3 very different types of problems that you're going to do today. All right, and I would, hopefully you've written these down and kind of worked your way through these as I did. I would have them sitting right out in front of me, all right? And so I guess here's how I would be doing this if I were you. Problem number one is a letter over a number. So I'd be like, all right, which of those ways has a letter over a number? Oh, here it is. And so I know on this, I'm going to multiply by the number in the bottom because that gives me the cross canceling. We do the same thing on top. All right. This problem, so I'm doing every other one, remember? So now it's a fraction times a letter. So which one is my fraction times a letter? Oh, it's this one right here. So anytime I have a fraction times a letter, we multiply by the reciprocal. I flip it upside down. And the reason I want to do this is I get that cross canceling once again. And all of this just becomes a 1. So I get 1y, which is y. And then my third type, oops, wrong thing, is, oh, it must be up. When I have a number attached to a letter like this. All right, and then I'm like, oh, that type looks like this. And this is where I divide both sides by the number attached to the letter. So like I said, I don't want you to try to remember or memorize 3 different types. All right, what I want you to do is think, okay, how do I get this letter by myself? So if I'm working on this, it's good to have them to go back at and kind of look at. But there's a point where I want you to be able to look at a question. Like, let's just say that I'm looking at this question right here. And I'm like, how can I get this m all by itself? Well, if I multiply this by a 7, this would cross cancel. So I know in this problem, I need to multiply both sides by 7s. All right. If I have a problem that is set up more like, find one, like this, number 18, I'd be like, there's a 60 in the bottom. What can I do to get rid of this 60? Well, if I multiply by a 60 over 1, I can get that cross canceling going on. So I know that I need to multiply both sides by 60. All right. And then if I have a problem like this, it's the same idea. All right. What can I do to get rid of this 4? Well, if I divide by a 4, then that becomes a 1. And so I know to divide both sides by 4. The main thing is, remember, whatever I do to one side, I have to do the exact same thing to the other side. Every single one of these problems you see, I do the exact same thing to both sides. No matter what I'm doing, I'm always doing whatever I did on the left, I do the same thing on the right. That way, we're keeping everything equivalent. I divided this side by -3, so I divide that side by -3. And remember, no matter how easy the problem is, I don't want to hear, oh, I can just do it in my head. You've got to show this work. We got to get this repetition of how, when I encounter a problem, what do I do each and every time? All right, so last thing, don't forget, we're doing every other problem. So on this first one, we're going to do this one, skip a problem, do this one, skip this one, do this one, skip this one, do this one. We're going to work our way right down the page doing that. All right, when I get to this one, it's a little bit easier because they're by numbers. You can just think about doing the odds here. So I'm going to do 1, 3, 5, skip 7, or skip 6, do 7, do 9, do 11, do 13. So we're only doing every other problem as you are doing this. Make sure that we are doing this on notebook paper and we're showing our work for each problem. This is the first day we've done this. And so it might not be easy, might not be perfect, but if you will go through the steps that I showed you, they'll get to a point where you're like, oh, here's this type of problem. I know what to do. You'll get to a problem like this one right here. You'll be like, oh, there's an 8 in the bottom. So what do? I multiply each side by 8 because that will cross cancel. When I get to a problem like this, I'm like, oh, it's a fraction next to a letter. So if I multiply by the reciprocal, if I multiply by a 13 over 1, then we get some great cross canceling going on. And then I do the same thing here. So remember, we're doing every other. Don't be afraid to rewind. I would have these 3 types of problems maybe written out so they're right in front of you. These are all from the homework. All right, but have them out so you can kind of look and say, oh yeah, this is that type of problem. Here's how I get the letter by itself. Hopefully this helps. Any questions, feel free to email me. Good luck. Don't forget, we're only doing every other problem.